Joining me now is Jeh Johnson, former Secretary of Homeland Security for President Obama. Secretary, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Katie.
For joining us. It's a good time to have you. Looking at the destruction from Hurricane Irma, also Hurricane Harvey, and all the wildfires, from a Homeland Security perspective, what should be happening right now?
Well, it's important to remember that the response to natural disasters is a collective effort, state, local, and federal first responders. And it's a time when we really do see, and I've been to a number of disaster scenes when I was in office, federal, state, local, and volunteer, and the American Red Cross all working together pretty effectively. Florida is a massive disaster. Houston, Texas was a massive disaster, and we really count on our first responders to pull together, and by all accounts, from what I'm seeing, they're doing that. I think Brock Long, the new FEMA administrator, gets a lot of credit. And FEMA, frankly, is in a much better place than it was from the days of Katrina. And I give Craig Fugate, the former FEMA administrator, a lot of credit for really building that organization into a first-rate organization.
The response, though, with all of these disasters that we're seeing, we have Irma, we have Harvey, the wildfires, does it get stretched? Are there enough resources to go around?
Well, clearly, there are limited resources, limited person power, limited dollars. Congress is going to have to go back into the coffers for Florida, I suspect. And so there are a lot of people right now working overtime. The press has kind of moved off of Texas, but the recovery effort is still very much underway there.
Yeah.
People are digging themselves out and trying to get back to their homes. The water's receding, but the damage is still there. And so the effort of FEMA, the Red Cross, and I'm glad to see that you put out information about how people can donate to the Red Cross, they're still on the ground, and they're going to be on the ground for some time, and they're going to be on the ground for some time in Florida
Especially
as well.
Considering how many people who did not have flood insurance in Houston because they weren't in a flood zone. Hundreds of thousands without power in Florida right now. The process of getting that up and running, Tom Bossert, the DHS not secretary, he was talking a little bit earlier, Homeland Security advisor was talking a little bit earlier about the process of getting that done, federal, state, local. He said it could take weeks.
I'm sure it will. And one of the things FEMA does exceptionally well now is mobilize resources, mobilize food, water, generators before the storm hits. I like to say the U.S. Army could take a lesson from FEMA, but now it's very much mobilization of resources, getting people the word about how they can use these resources and giving them the needed safety tips. It's still not safe necessarily to go out, leave your home, and go out in places where there might be down power lines and trees and so forth.
It seems like the president has, I'm not going to use the word pivot, no one likes that word, but he's adjusted in the past couple of weeks, and he hasn't been as inflammatory as he had been in the past. Do you think that this could be, are you hopeful that this could be Donald Trump moving in a more unifying direction?
Well, who's to know? How many times have we forecast that in the last 8 months?
We've asked it a lot.
Next week, something else blows up. John Kelly appears to be doing a fine job as the White House Chief of Staff. I know John. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in him. And he appears to be putting organization and order to this White House, very much with the president's approval. And I think that is reflected in a lot of the decision-making process we're seeing. The rollout of Secretary Mattis and General Dunford in front of the West Wing, I suspect John had a lot to do with that.
You're hopeful he's going to get things together. Being the former Secretary of DHS, short-lived term certainly for him, how did that prepare him for the White House?
Well, certainly occupying that political appointment civilian position, working in the interagency, getting a first-hand look at how the National Security Council works, how the White House staff functions, and you get a window into that when you're a cabinet secretary. I'm sure went a long way to preparing John, but he obviously has the president's confidence, and more than just the 7-month experience, he's a man of character and integrity, and he's a tough individual. So he's going to hang in there, and when the commander-in-chief asked him to do something, he saluted and said, yes, sir.
Moving to another subject, there's news this week that Facebook was selling ads to Russians who created bots and memes to try and sway U.S. voters. You were on with Andrea Mitchell, and you said that you guys didn't know anything about this in Homeland Security. Should you have?
That's an interesting question. Nothing would surprise me at this point. In Homeland Security and DHS last year, we were very focused on the hacking at the DNC, and we were very, very focused on the scanning and probing we saw around voter registration databases. The list of states where we saw this activity was growing, and we did not know where it was going to lead by Election Day. And so my effort, first and foremost, was to get the states to come in and seek our cybersecurity assistance, and 33 of them actually did that. And so that was a principal point of focus. There's these news things coming to light, and I don't believe that we've seen the end of the story. There may be more out there to be told about last year's election season.
Facebook's a private company. How do you combat that? How do you stop them from taking money from a foreign government to make ads that could sway the U.S. electorate?
Well,
there's a lot of people that are concerned about that.
That's a very good question, and sometimes trying to keep track of who's on Facebook, who's on YouTube, who's on some of these other internet service providers can be like trying to chase a rabbit, because they can act with lightning speed. They're aggressive, they're clever, they're tenacious. And I said to Congress in June that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And those on offense have the upper hand right now because they're so creative and ingenious. So I think we have a long way to go. This needs to be a national imperative and a partnership between the federal government and the private sector.
16 years after 9/11, what's the biggest threat facing us right now?
Well, the thing that kept me up at night, and many things kept me up at night, but the thing that kept me up at night most often was homegrown violent extremism. Counterterrorism, terrorism has evolved a long way from 9/11. DHS was formed in 2002 on the assumption that terrorism is something that would infiltrate our borders. So we merged all these border security functions into one cabinet level department. Now I think we have to be focused in addition to homegrown violent extremism, which is why when I was in office, I really wanted to see us bolster our domestic countering violent extremism efforts in this country. And I hope that this administration will continue that. I'm worried that they will not.
Former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson. Secretary, thank you so much for coming in and joining us on set in the newsroom today. Appreciate your time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.